In early March, preparations for a travelling exhibition of the Neverland auction were well underway. Back when auctioneers Darren Julian and Martin Nolan wore matching shirt-t-shirt combos, giddily anticipating the successful sale of Michael Jackson's things.
There you go. It's eye level now, that's it.
You know, it's really, the reaction has been phenomenal, and it just bodes well. I mean, we're heartened by the reaction, and we think it's just going to be an amazing sale.
And this is where they chose to unveil their prize collection to the waiting world, drawing literally tens of people here to Newbridge Island, just a short drive from Dublin. And they were very excited about it too, putting on quite a show. Being no strangers to dealing with the rich and infamous, Darren and Martin had previously organised auctions for the likes of Madonna, Cher, U2 and Barbra Streisand. They once even sold William Shatner's kidney stone for $75,000. And so when they were hired by Jackson to organise the sale of over 2,000 items from his Neverland ranch, they were confident that absolutely nothing would go wrong.
There's apparently a lawsuit has been filed against us. They're claiming that they didn't realise we were going to do an auction. So
I just checked my BlackBerry, and my office had emailed me stating that it's all over the press that Michael Jackson's suing us. And you can imagine, I mean, we're very surprised about that because we've worked with him for the last 8 months to put this auction together. We're an auction house. Why would he give us all his possessions, if he didn't want us to sell them?
So why sell them in the first place? To tell that story, we must first learn how a man could become so rich he could buy or do anything he wanted. And so we need to go back to the moment that Michael Jackson's bank balance went from big to enormous. At Christmas time in 1982, there was only one thing that anyone anywhere in the entire world was getting excited about. And it wasn't that a fat man in a red outfit had just arrived. It was because a skinny zombie in a red outfit had just arrived. When Michael Jackson released the album Thriller, he was announcing to the world that he'd left behind his old family band, the Jackson 5, and finally become a man. Thriller would become the highest-selling record of all time, and at its peak it was selling 1 million copies a week. An estimated 50 million copies were sold worldwide, with Jackson earning around $2 for every single album shifted. Michael Jackson had just become a super-rich global superstar.
Thriller generated hundreds of millions of dollars through direct record sales and then the multiplier effect of the spin-off, merchandising, led into commercials. It created, frankly, the impetus for Michael to be called the King of Pop.
With this first taste of mega money came the first signs of a taste for spending. But for now at least, it just meant Michael would splash some cash making his clothes all nice and sparkly, finally being able to buy the kind of glove only the rich dare dream of.
Now, of course, this is the centerpiece of the auction. This is Michael Jackson's glove that he wore throughout the 1980s. There are some snags, there's some stone loss here. There is some wear, very little staining. Very beautiful shape. I would say that something like this could ultimately realize $50,000 to $100,000. This is Michael Jackson makeup. When you're buying a piece of memorabilia from a famous performer, a lot of times this makes it go up in value. People actually want to see this sort of personal trait of Michael Jackson right there on the shirt.
I think money is Michael's god because Michael equates happiness with having a lot of money and doing what he wants to do when he wants to do it, in a sense.
And the money just kept rolling in, with Jackson agreeing to use his valuable face to sell just about anything, including fizzy pop. High-octane fizzy pop spectacles saw Jackson make millions, but would also see his head unexpectedly catch fire during an onstage pyrotechnics display.
He could never grow his hair again. That's why he wears a wig.
Despite the new rug, Michael went on to prove he still had a good head for business and bought the publishing company that held the rights to 250 Beatles songs for $47.5 million, an idea he surprisingly got from Paul McCartney himself.
Paul was telling Michael, that if you really want to make money in this business, you've got to own publishing rights, because Paul owned the publishing rights to a lot of Buddy Holly songs. And Michael was fascinated by that because he really didn't know much about it. And after Paul explained it, Michael said something along the lines, and joking, he said, maybe one day I'll own your songs. You never know. Maybe I'll get the Beatles catalog. And Paul just really didn't take that very seriously.
He outbid Paul McCartney for the Beatles back catalog, which to this day created a strain in their relationship.
His gaining the catalog, control of the Beatles catalog, it was huge earnings potential. I mean, it's like having a printing press for money.
Grossing an estimated $57.5 million and selling 30 million copies. The album Bad helped make Jackson the world's highest-earning musician in 1988 and 1989, including a year-and-a-half-long tour bringing in a record $125 million.
He's still living off, you know, the money that was generated in the 1980s. That's how much money was generated back then. Enough for him to continue to live on it and have this eccentric lifestyle and be able to buy this crazy stuff.
While most young men in their 20s dream of buying a PlayStation or maybe a new mountain bike, the newly dubbed King of Pop decided he wanted an entire kingdom, and with millions in the bank, he went and bought one.
When you're a pop music star and you live in a house called Neverland, that's pretty far out.
He demonstrated to himself that he could bring about an experience that beyond anything else he had ever seen or felt, and he went wild, and Neverland was the first manifestation of that.
As I recall, Michael purchased Neverland for about $16 or $17 million, which made it a tremendous real estate deal. He would have spent probably another $5 or $6 million on just retrofitting what existed there, which would bring up the price from, let's say, $17 million to about, you know, let's say maybe $23, $24, $25 million. And then he hired, of course, a huge staff of people, which cost somewhere in the order of about $1 million a month to run Neverland, or more.
Getting in to have a snoop about is virtually impossible unless you're Martin Bashir, Oprah Winfrey, 10 years old, or luckily for us, a family of Germans with a video camera. Neverland became a peaceful land of fantasy for Michael, the perfect hideaway. He built stables, fairground rides, a private zoo, surrounding himself with hundreds of statues, even his own steam train.
Thank you.
Mr. Jackson, recht herzlichen Dank.
This huge sort of fantasy place that Neverland became cost Michael probably $50 million at least.
Now ruling his very own kingdom, Michael decided it was about time he started acting the part.
He started thinking of himself in sort of a royal way, with all of the royal finery and the royal portraits, and he started seeing himself that way and kind of liked that image.
One of the most extraordinary things about his psychology, of course, is that he's taken a metaphor, the King of Pop, and he's almost tried to apply it literally to himself, to see himself as a king-like figure in terms of the regalia, the throne, you know, all of the symbols associated with being a genuine king. And that would suggest that it's almost like somebody who is not totally in touch with literal reality, you know, someone who's got a bit carried away in terms of what he's been told about himself and doesn't draw that fine distinction that many of the rest of us would draw.
We all love Michael Jackson, but I'm going to tell you something interesting. Michael Jackson also loves Michael Jackson. A lot of things at Neverland Ranch with his picture on it, his initials, and of course this simple 12-foot-high throne was in his home. I don't know how often he sat in it, but it's huge. And as you can see right around here, what would be head level, you'll see that there are little sort of grease stains, and that was likely where Mr. Jackson or somebody else's head was, and that actually adds value to a piece like that. We don't want to see stains on our own furniture, our own clothing, but when it's a celebrity's, God bless America, it goes up in value. I'd imagine something like this would sell for $20,000.
As well as thrones and kingly regalia, every royal court needs an official artist, and we found Michael's here, Santa Fe, New Mexico, in an area just off the infamous Route 66. This unassuming building, tucked away down a typical southern dusty street, is Gold Leaf Frame Makers. Now, it might not look like much, but inside something beautiful is being created. Meet artist David Nordell. David has devoted his life to painting and drawing, and doing it so well that over the years he accumulated quite a famous client list, who were hiring him to create lovely pieces of art for them, just like these ones. And it wasn't long before David and Michael's paths would cross for the first time.
Michael had seen a painting that I did for Steven Spielberg hanging in his office. Michael called me one evening and he asked me if I gave drawing and painting lessons. And so we spent a lot of time drawing and painting. We kind of hit it off right away.
And it was back in the 80s, probably whilst the pair were sitting together, drawing and painting and dreaming of lovely, magical things, that Michael asked David to help him turn him into the king he so wished to become.
And this one represents him being crowned, apparently. And the one over on this side is him being knighted.
Moving, epic, poignant. Rather like the moment when Michael discovered that money can't buy you everything.
You know, at one point along the way, Michael actually attempted to buy a knighthood, if such a thing can actually be purchased, you know, because you're supposed to be a British subject. And he did quite a sort of a campaign to have this occur, but unfortunately it didn't occur.
Having failed to become Sir Michael of Neverland, Jackson took a new direction and instead attempted to unite the whole world with the song Black or White. Michael renewed his contract with Sony for a record-breaking $65 million, reportedly receiving an $18 million cash advance for making the Dangerous album, as well as a $5 million bonus. He negotiated a 25% royalty rate for every one of the 30 million albums sold, making another $60 million.
Michael Jackson was spending a lot of money in the 1990s just on being extravagant, just on, you know, private jets and crazy artwork and, you know, and just the lifestyle of Michael Jackson. You know, everywhere he goes, he's used to being treated like a king.
I mean, the extraordinary thing about Michael Jackson was simply his level of spending. He made the Beckhams, you know, big spenders themselves, look a bit like Gandhi in this respect. And of course, this was an extraordinary thing to be doing in the 1990s. It was almost as if he was saying, self-realisation, what's it all about? It's about how much you can spend, what you can afford. And this had a big impact on aspects of contemporary culture. You're only as good, as valuable as the amount of money you've got. And he pioneered much of this. This was a level of excess we had never seen before.
Despite all this cash, Michael was unhappy. He'd already spoken of a lost childhood in his autobiography Moonwalk a few years earlier. But in 1993, he decided he wanted to say it all again.
All I can tell you is that I was there for a lot of it, and he seemed to be pretty happy to me. But if he was going home at night privately crying tears, you know, because he wanted to be playing stickball instead of singing Ben, then I guess we have to just take his word for it.
I think we have to interpret what he bought at Neverland and which we will see at Neverland as a representation of what Michael wanted, what Michael dreamed of what Michael didn't have as a child. And they represent something important, missing probably within his soul, within his psyche.
But when you're a multimillionaire mourning a lost childhood, you can afford to pay someone to paint you one. It was time for Michael to turn to his old friend artist David Nodal for help once again.
This was Playmates for a Lonely Child. In the painting, Michael was standing right back here, and that's the costume he wore in Smooth Criminal. This is a child without a playmate. I think Michael was in the same position. He couldn't participate with children's activities, didn't have those kind of friends, and I think that resonated with him. It's called Moonrise. Children and Michael kind of running up this hill. All the children are very happy. Field of Dreams. That started out, he wanted me to do a sketch of him with some kids walking, kids of all nations, all religions, all nationalities. Here's Michael, Macaulay Culkin right here. It was a lot of work, but it was fun to do.
And in years to come, with the arrival of Jackson's son, Prince Michael, David was asked to create a painting befitting his royal heir.
Michael wanted me to do a portrait of Prince. He wanted me to do a large painting. And this was totally Michael's idea, playing on Prince's name. But it shows Prince sitting on the throne, pages on either side. And I put animals in there. Michael's face is in there. And I thought it was just a great idea for a portrait. I spent a lot of time doing that.
Having become an unstoppable money-making machine, Michael had created himself a magical world of paintings and art fit for a king of pop. But all that was about to come crashing down around him.